Ethan sat in the small, dimly lit room, the soft hum of the space station vibrating beneath him. His fingers tapped nervously on the console, his heart racing with anticipation. He had been chosen, no, selected, to test out the latest virtual reality game. It wasn't any ordinary game, though. This one was created by the Galactic Consortium, an alliance of the most advanced species in the universe, a game designed to simulate galactic warfare, testing strategies and skills. And he, a mere human, had been chosen as the first human participant. The thought thrilled him. He was no one special, just an ordinary guy from Earth. But here he was, on the brink of something extraordinary. The countdown began. Ethan leaned back in his chair, trying to calm his nerves. His hand hovered over the start button. With a deep breath, he pressed it. The room around him seemed to flicker for a second. At first, he thought it was just a glitch in the system. But then, the entire environment around him shifted. The walls dissolved into nothingness, replaced by a vast expanse of space. The bright stars shimmered in every direction. Ethan blinked, his eyes widening. This was not the game he was expecting. His breath caught in his throat as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He could still feel the chair beneath him, the weight of his body pressing against it, but he was no longer in the room on the space station. He was in the middle of a starry void, floating weightlessly. Panic surged through him. What had happened? Was this still part of the game? He could feel his heart racing faster. His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. There were no controls, no console in sight. There was only the endless darkness of space. Suddenly, a holographic voice crackled in his ear, smooth and cold. "Welcome, observer. You have been selected to participate in the galaxy's greatest war game. Your role is simple: observe, survive, and learn." The words hit him like a shockwave. Observe. He whispered to himself, his voice shaking. What was going on? He didn't sign up for this. This was supposed to be a game, a simple simulation, a chance to play some more games like anyone else. But this was no game. He didn't know it yet, but the situation was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. Before he could fully process what was happening, the stars around him started to change. A flash of light tore through the void. A massive ship appeared before him. It was like nothing he had ever seen, gigantic, sleek, and menacing. Its hull shimmered with a dark metallic sheen, and strange symbols pulsed along its surface. It was the size of a small city, dwarfing anything he had seen in movies or games. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The ship didn't just appear, it came to life. Bright beams of light shot out from its sides, and the sound of engines revving filled the space. Was this part of the simulation? Was he supposed to be interacting with it? He tried to move, but his body felt frozen. He could only watch as the ship's immense cannons began to power up, glowing with energy. His mind raced. Was he in danger? Was this the first test, some kind of initiation? He didn't know what to do. Just as the ship was about to fire, something incredible happened. Another ship appeared, this one smaller but still massive. It was covered in shields and adorned with bright blue markings. The new arrival shot toward Ethan's location with lightning speed, intercepting the first ship just as it fired. The two massive vessels clashed in a violent explosion, the sheer force of it shaking Ethan's vision. He could feel the shockwave hit him. Even though there was no atmosphere in space, it rattled him to his core. The holographic voice returned, as if everything was happening according to plan. "You have been inserted into the war zone. Your mission is to survive and gather intelligence. The factions involved will soon take notice of your presence." Ethan could hardly breathe, his mind still reeling from the sight of the two ships fighting. This was real. This wasn't a simulation anymore. The game he had joined was something much darker, something far more dangerous. He could see the chaos unfolding around him. More ships began to emerge from various corners of space, each with its own distinct markings. He recognized none of them, but their intentions were clear. They were here to fight. Ethan had become an unwitting player in a galactic conflict. He tried to remain calm, to rationalize what was happening. Maybe he was still in a simulation, just experiencing it more vividly than he expected. But deep down, he knew the truth. This was real. The stakes were real. His life was at risk. He was stuck in the middle of a war he didn't understand, with no way out. Ethan's fingers gripped the edge of his seat. He had to move. He had to find a way out of this. But how? The game's voice was the only sound that reached his ears. There were no instructions, no explanations, just a cold, indifferent presence that seemed to guide everything. Before he could think further, another flash of light illuminated the space around him. This time, it wasn't a ship. It was a figure, a humanoid being floating toward him. The figure was dressed in a uniform that resembled military garb, its face hidden by a dark visor. A weapon, a sleek alien gun, hung at the side of the figure. The being stopped in front of Ethan, its voice clear and sharp. "Are you here to fight?" the being asked. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He felt completely out of his depth. He had no idea how to respond. Fight? Fight who? He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't prepared for any of this, but the being's presence felt urgent, and before he could think twice, it spoke again. "Then you must choose," the being said, its voice cold and unyielding. "There is no place for weakness in this war. Choose your side. Your survival depends on it." The message hit Ethan like a hammer. What was happening? Was he being forced to choose sides in this conflict? He wasn't ready for any of this. He wasn't trained. He didn't know what was going on. Yet, somehow, he had to make a decision. He had to pick a faction, a group to align himself with. Ethan looked around. He could see the ships, the space battles, the conflict unfolding in every direction. There was no time to hesitate. He had to choose. He didn't even know what the factions stood for. He only knew that survival meant picking a side. The holographic voice spoke again. "You have 3 minutes to make your choice. Fail to decide, and you will be eliminated." The seconds seemed to stretch on forever as Ethan's mind raced. Could he really pick a side? What if he chose wrong? What if this choice led to his death? His chest tightened with fear, but something deep inside him told him to trust his instincts. He had to decide. He had no other option. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. This wasn't a game. This was real. And he was going to have to fight, whether he was ready or not. "Chat QT said." Ethan's heart raced as the pressure of the moment weighed on him. The holographic voice had given him a clear deadline. He had to choose a side in the war, or risk being eliminated. The vastness of space stretched out around him, filled with chaos and confusion. Alien ships clashed above him, their engines roaring as they fired energy beams at each other. The flashing lights and explosions lit up the darkness of space, and Ethan could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. His mind was spinning. He had no idea which faction to trust, or even which ones were allies and which were enemies. The humanoid figure in front of him, its face hidden behind a dark visor, waited expectantly. Its body language was cold and professional, as if it had been in situations like this 1,000 times before. Ethan had never felt so out of place in his life. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a commander. He was just a regular guy from Earth who had been thrust into a galactic war he didn't understand. And now, his survival depended on making a choice that could affect the fates of entire civilizations. "Choose," the being said again, its voice colder than before. Ethan swallowed hard. He glanced around, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding in front of him. More ships were entering the battle, each one with its own unique design and insignia. Some were sleek and futuristic. Others were massive and intimidating, bristling with weaponry. He could hear the sounds of weapons charging, the crackle of energy beams being fired, and the eerie hum of massive engines. But despite the madness around him, everything felt strangely silent. except for the voice in his head, urging him to make a choice. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at the being once more. "What are my options?" he asked, his voice shaky but determined. The being's helmeted head tilted slightly, as if considering the question. "You are not here to ask questions, observer. You are here to observe, and to fight if necessary. You must choose a faction now." He felt a cold chill run down his spine. What did it mean to observe? Was he just supposed to watch this war unfold, or was he expected to become a part of it? Ethan didn't know, but the pressure was mounting. He had to decide. Suddenly, the view of space shifted before him. The first faction appeared, an enormous fleet of sleek, silver ships that glowed with a soft blue light. The markings on the ships were unfamiliar to Ethan, but their smooth design suggested advanced technology. The holographic voice spoke again, introducing them. Faction 1, the Xalax Empire. Known for their unmatched speed and precision in battle, they are masters of advanced technology and covert warfare. Their strength lies in stealth, making them difficult to detect until it is too late. Ethan's mind raced. The Xalax Empire sounded powerful. Their ships were fast, their tactics cunning. But were they good? Were they trustworthy? Ethan didn't know enough to judge, but he knew that if he sided with them, he would have to trust in their ability to keep him alive in this war. That was a big gamble. Before he could even process this new information, another faction emerged from the darkness. This one much larger and more imposing. The ships were massive, with dark green and red designs, and they appeared to be more heavily armored. The holographic voice spoke once more. Faction 2, the Vrenari Dominion. Known for their brute strength and overwhelming firepower, the Vrenari rely on direct confrontation and sheer force. Their warships are heavily fortified, and their fleets are some of the largest in the galaxy. The Vrenari Dominion sounded like a force to be reckoned with. Their tactics were straightforward: attack and overwhelm the enemy with sheer power. If they were on his side, Ethan wouldn't have to worry about fighting small battles. They would crush everything in their path. But was that the kind of war he wanted to be a part of? The destruction, the loss of life, it all seemed so brutal. Could he trust them? Before he could continue pondering, a third faction entered the fray. This one was completely different from the others. Their ships were smaller, more agile, with intricate designs that almost seemed organic. The holographic voice introduced them. Faction 3, the Zherka Collective. Masters of manipulation and subterfuge, the Zherka are experts in controlling the battlefield from behind the scenes. They do not rely on brute force, but on strategy, espionage, and deception. Their strength lies in the ability to turn the tide of battle before anyone even knows what's happening. Ethan felt a sense of unease as he observed the Zherka ships. Their tactics seemed too sneaky, too deceptive. Would they lie to him? Could he trust them to keep their word? Everything about them seemed to promise underhandedness, and Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready to play those kinds of games. But at the same time, the Zherka's ability to control situations from the shadows could be useful. In a war this big, maybe that's what he needed, a way to manipulate the situation to his advantage. "Choose now," the voice insisted. The being in front of Ethan didn't move. It was waiting for him to make up his mind. But how could he choose? Each faction had its strengths and weaknesses, and Ethan didn't know anything about their true motivations. Was one faction more likely to betray him than the others? Would choosing wrong mean his death? The weight of the decision felt unbearable. But then, something strange happened. For a brief moment, the chaos around him seemed to slow down. The flashes of laser fire and explosions in space became distant, almost muffled. Ethan's mind cleared, and he realized something that hadn't occurred to him before. He didn't have to make this decision alone. He could observe. He could gather information. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to play all these factions against each other. But there was one thing he knew for sure. This was no longer just a game. The stakes were too high. If he made the wrong choice, it wouldn't just be his life on the line. it would be the lives of millions. The fate of entire species hung in the balance, and Ethan had to choose wisely. The voice came again, colder this time. Your time is running out. Choose, now. Ethan took a deep breath. It was time. He didn't know if he was ready, but he had no choice. The war had already begun, and he was already a part of it. He had to make his move. And so, with his heart pounding, Ethan made his choice. The pressure was suffocating. Ethan could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him like 1,000 tons of steel. The voice in his ear, distant but persistent, repeated its chilling command. You have chosen. You will now be integrated into the faction you have selected. The cold indifference of the voice only made his decision seem more final. There was no going back now. As the holographic voice faded into the background, Ethan could feel the world around him shift. The stars, the ships, and the endless expanse of space all seemed to blur for a moment. A flash of light filled his vision, and suddenly, everything became different. He was no longer floating in the void of space. The surroundings had transformed. He stood now on a metallic platform, with towering structures stretching into the sky around him. The air was thick with tension, crackling with energy. All around him, soldiers in dark, high-tech armor marched in formation, their faces covered by helmets, their weapons gleaming with deadly intent. He recognized them immediately. These were the Xalax Empire's soldiers, sleek and imposing, the very same ones he had seen in the battle earlier. He had chosen to align with them. Ethan's mind raced. This was not what he had expected. He thought the choice would be simple. Pick a side and continue to observe. But no, this was real. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of this war. He had picked a faction, and now, his survival depended on how well he could adapt to this new reality. A figure stepped forward from the ranks of soldiers. It was a tall, slender individual, dressed in the same dark armor as the others. They moved with the grace of a predator, every step calculated and precise. The figure paused in front of Ethan, their helmeted face studying him. "You're the new recruit?" the figure asked, their voice smooth but laced with a tone that bordered on condescending. Ethan could barely make out the words, but they were clear enough. Ethan swallowed, trying to muster his confidence. "Yeah," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "I'm here to help." It sounded lame to his ears, but there was no turning back now. He had to play the part. He had to survive. The soldier nodded once, but Ethan could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The Xalax don't help. They dominate. You're either strong enough to survive here, or you're dead. Simple as that. Before Ethan could respond, the figure turned and began to walk toward the entrance of a massive building in the center of the platform. The soldiers around him moved in perfect synchronization, their boots hitting the metal ground in unison, creating a rhythmic sound that felt almost like a heartbeat. Ethan followed, his mind still reeling from the shock of the sudden shift. Inside the building, the atmosphere changed again. The air was colder, the hum of machinery louder. It was a war room, a command center. Screens flickered with various star systems, tactical data, and live footage from different battle zones. The walls were lined with advanced technology, each piece more complex and alien than the last. This was the heart of the Xalax Empire's military operations. The soldier who had led Ethan into the room turned to face him. "This is where we prepare," they said. "Here, you'll learn what it takes to survive in the Xalax Empire. We are the hunters of the galaxy, and our enemies are everywhere. You will be given training, equipment, and a mission. But be warned, recruit, failure is not an option." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his nerves. "Understood." The soldier stepped aside and gestured to a row of training stations. Each one was equipped with advanced virtual simulations that allowed soldiers to practice combat scenarios, from hand-to-hand fighting to piloting the Empire's deadliest warships. Ethan had never seen anything like it. The technology was beyond anything Earth had ever developed. but it was also terrifying in its scale and precision. "Your first test begins now," the soldier said, their voice cold and detached. "You will undergo a simulation to assess your abilities. You will face real threats. Fail, and you will not survive. Succeed, and you may earn your place in our ranks." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. This was real. There was no safety net here. He wasn't just playing a game anymore. The gravity of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. If he didn't succeed in this trial, there was a very real chance he wouldn't make it out alive. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The soldier gestured for him to step into the training station. Without a word, Ethan moved forward, his legs feeling heavier with each step. He had no idea what kind of simulation he was about to face, but he knew one thing: he had to survive. As he stepped into the simulation chamber, the world around him shifted once more. The metallic walls of the Xalax facility faded away, replaced by the harsh, rocky terrain of an alien planet. The sky above was dark, filled with swirling clouds and streaks of lightning. The ground beneath his feet was uneven, rocky, and treacherous. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and dust. Suddenly, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps. He turned, his pulse quickening, and saw a massive creature emerge from the shadows. It was a towering behemoth, covered in scales and armor, its eyes glowing a bright red. Its massive claws scraped against the ground as it moved toward him, each step causing the earth to tremble. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he fumbled for his weapon. He hadn't been given any training yet. He had no idea how to use the advanced Xalax weaponry, but there was no time to waste. The creature was charging at him, and if he didn't act fast, he'd be crushed under its massive weight. Instinctively, Ethan ducked behind a large rock for cover. His hand shook as he gripped the sleek weapon in his hand. It was unlike anything he had ever held before, light, yet somehow heavier than it looked. The weapon hummed with energy, almost alive in his grasp. He aimed it at the charging creature, unsure of what would happen next. With a deep breath, he fired. The blast of energy was like nothing he had ever seen before. The beam struck the creature square in the chest, sending it staggering backward. It howled in pain, its red eyes flashing with fury. Ethan didn't wait for it to recover. He fired again, this time hitting the creature in its vulnerable underbelly. The creature let out a final roar before collapsing to the ground, its massive form shuddering as it hit the dirt. Ethan stood frozen, his chest heaving with exertion. His hand still gripped the weapon, his mind racing. He had done it. He had survived his first test. But as the creature's body began to disintegrate into the air, a cold voice echoed in his mind. "Survival is just the beginning. You have chosen the Xalax. Now, prove that you belong here. There is no room for weakness in this war." Ethan's heart dropped. He had won the first battle, but there were many more to come, and with each one, the stakes would only grow higher. The Xalax Empire had no room for mistakes, and Ethan was just beginning to understand what that really meant. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear as he stood in the aftermath of his first trial. The creature's massive body had disintegrated into the air, leaving nothing behind but the echoes of his weapon's energy blast and the eerie stillness of the simulation. For a moment, all he could do was stare at the empty space where the creature had fallen. The weight of what he had just done crashed down on him. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some fictional war. This was real, and there was no turning back. The cold voice from the simulation abruptly broke the silence, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. "Congratulations, recruit. You have passed your first test. But remember, the Xalax Empire is not interested in weaklings. Do not get comfortable." A sudden, sharp hum filled the air, and the rocky terrain around Ethan began to shift and blur. He felt his stomach lurch as everything seemed to spin around him. The simulation was ending, and just as quickly as it had begun, the alien world disappeared. The training station reappeared, solid and unyielding. The walls, the screens, and the bright overhead lights greeted him once again, pulling him back to reality. He stumbled out of the simulation pod, his legs shaky and his breath ragged. His heart was still pounding, and his hands were slick with sweat. The experience had been intense, far more than he had ever anticipated. Despite the fleeting moments of relief, one thought gnawed at the back of his mind. Was this what he had signed up for? Was this the path he really wanted to take? The soldier who had led him here earlier approached him once again, their presence commanding and cold. "Well done, recruit," they said, their tone as emotionless as ever. "You survived the first trial. That's more than most can say, but don't get too cocky. The real trials are still ahead of you." Ethan nodded, unable to find the words to respond. He felt like he had just entered a storm, and there was no telling when it would pass. He was a human, one of the least advanced species in the galaxy, yet here he was, surrounded by alien soldiers, and thrust into a war that he didn't understand. But there was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and now he had to see it through. The soldier's helmeted face shifted slightly, and they motioned for Ethan to follow them. He had no idea where they were headed, but his instincts told him to stay close and do as he was told. He couldn't afford to make enemies in this place. Not yet. They walked down a narrow hallway, past rows of other soldiers who looked just as cold and detached as the one who was guiding him. The walls were made of the same smooth metallic material as everything else in the Talax base. The air was sterile, almost suffocating. Ethan couldn't help but feel like he was a cog in a massive machine, a machine that cared little for his individual needs or desires. They reached a door at the end of the hall, and the soldier stopped in front of it. "This is the briefing room," they said. "Inside, you'll receive your next assignment. It's time to prove that you can handle more than just simulations. Are you ready?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, but only for a second. He had no choice but to keep going forward. "I'm ready," he said, his voice more confident than he felt. The soldier gave a curt nod and pushed open the door. Inside, the room was illuminated by holographic displays, with multiple screens showing tactical maps of various star systems. Several high-ranking Salax officers stood at the far side of the room, their eyes focused on a large central holographic projection that displayed a star chart with multiple blinking red dots. Ethan could feel the weight of their gaze as he entered. These were the leaders of the Empire, and they were not here for small talk. The soldier gestured for Ethan to step forward. He did so, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. As he approached the officers, one of them, an imposing figure with sharp features and a dark blue uniform, turned toward him. Their voice was smooth, with an edge of authority that sent a ripple of unease down Ethan's spine. "Recruit Ethan, welcome to your next phase of training," the officer said, their eyes scanning him like a predator sizing up prey. "You've demonstrated the basic skills necessary to survive. But now we will see if you have the tactical mind to match your strength." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't feel like he had the mind for anything, let alone tactics, but he wasn't about to show weakness. "Not now. We are preparing for a critical operation," the officer continued. "There is a rebel faction in the Vernari Dominion's territory. They have become a significant thorn in our side, disrupting supply lines and sabotaging our operations. The Emperor has ordered their elimination." Ethan frowned, trying to process the information. The Vernari Dominion. He had heard of them. They were the faction that relied on brute force, overwhelming their enemies with massive armies and destructive power. The fact that the Xalex Empire, known for its precision and stealth, was now targeting them told him just how serious this conflict had become. "What do you want me to do?" Ethan asked, his voice more steady than he felt. The officer's lips curled into a faint smile. "You're going to be dropped onto their homeworld. Your mission will be to infiltrate, gather intelligence, and identify the leader of this rebel group. Once we have that information, we will send in a full force to eliminate them. If you succeed, You will have earned your place as a true soldier of the Xalax Empire. Fail, and you will not be given another chance. Ethan's mind raced. He had just finished one trial, and now he was being thrust into another. A real mission with life or death consequences. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a brutal, unforgiving reality, and Ethan could feel his stomach twist at the thought of what was to come. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to be a pawn in some galactic war. But there was no escaping it now. He had chosen his side, and the Xalax Empire would not tolerate failure. You will leave in the next few hours, the officer continued. Prepare yourself, recruit. The war is far from over, and this is just the beginning. Ethan nodded, trying to hide the doubt that was creeping into his mind. He didn't know if he was ready for this, but there was no going back. His training had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than he ever could have imagined. As he left the briefing room, the weight of what was coming sank in. He was about to embark on a mission that could change the course of the war, and maybe even his life. He could only hope that he was prepared for what lay ahead. Ethan's heart raced as he walked out of the briefing room, his mind still grappling with the enormity of what he had just been told. He had been thrust into the heart of an intergalactic war. His training was still barely underway, and now he was being sent on a real mission. A mission that could either make him a hero or mark his final mistake. He barely registered the soldiers walking past him, the cold, mechanical atmosphere of the Xalax facility pressing in around him. His mind was focused solely on what awaited him. The Vernari Dominion, a planet known for its brutal, militaristic nature. A rebel faction that was disrupting the might of the Xalax Empire. The mission felt overwhelming. Ethan was no expert in combat. He was just a human, thrust into a galaxy at war, but there was no room for hesitation now. The only way forward was to complete his mission and survive. As he made his way to the equipment room, the weight of his thoughts pressed down on him. He had no choice but to do this. If he failed, there was no coming back. The Xalax Empire didn't have patience for failure. And yet, part of him still couldn't shake the feeling that he was out of his depth. He had barely survived the creature in the simulation. Now he was going to face an entire enemy faction. He couldn't afford to show fear, but fear was all he could feel. In the equipment room, rows upon rows of weapons and gear were neatly displayed. Ethan felt a jolt of confusion when he saw the array of tools laid out before him. None of them were anything he was familiar with. Laser rifles, energy blades, armored suits. The weapons of the Xalax Empire were sleek, powerful, and unlike anything he had ever seen back on Earth. How was he supposed to use any of this? He hadn't been trained yet. He barely even knew how to shoot a regular rifle, let alone one that could fire concentrated energy beams. A soldier, tall and broad-shouldered, approached him, noticing his hesitation. Their armor was dark and gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They were the same soldier who had led him into the briefing room earlier. "You look uncertain, recruit," the soldier said with a dry chuckle. "You're not the first. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. Here." They handed him a sleek rifle, its grip cool and smooth against his palm. "This is a standard-issue pulse rifle. You've already seen how it works. You just have to point it and pull the trigger. The rest is instinct. Now, suit up. You're not going to the Vernari Dominion unprepared." Ethan took the rifle with a nod, trying to mask the unease rising in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but there was no room for doubt. If he failed, the consequences were too high. There would be no second chances. He moved to the nearby suit station. As he began to slip into the Xalax armor, it felt heavier than he expected. The suit hugged his body, and with each piece he put on, he felt more like a part of the war machine. The technology was advanced, but the weight of the armor made it feel more like a cage than a tool of empowerment. It was designed to enhance strength, protect the wearer, and adapt to various battle scenarios. But none of that comforted him. Once suited up, The soldier gestured toward a large bay door that slid open with a hiss. Beyond it, a transport ship stood waiting, its engines idling, ready for departure. Ethan felt a nervous energy thrumming in his chest. It was happening. The mission was about to begin. "You're about to enter the heart of enemy territory," the soldier said. "The Vernari Dominion is known for its defenses. They'll see you coming, but your mission is to get in, find the leader of the rebel faction, and relay that information to us. You don't need to fight their entire army. You just need to survive long enough to complete your objective. Understand?" Ethan swallowed. Yeah, understood. It wasn't like he had much of a choice. The soldier's voice softened for a moment, almost as if they were trying to be reassuring. "Survival is the most important thing. If you make it out alive, we'll take care of the rest." Ethan's stomach tightened. He wasn't sure if that was supposed to make him feel better. Survival. That was all that mattered. He'd heard it before. And as much as he wanted to focus on the mission ahead, part of him knew that the real challenge wasn't just completing the mission. It was making it out alive. The transport ship's hatch sealed with a loud hiss, and the engines roared to life. Ethan was strapped in beside a few other soldiers, all of them silent, focused. There was no chatter, no camaraderie, just a sense of cold, determined professionalism. Ethan felt his palms sweat inside his gloves. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one reminding him that this wasn't just a training exercise. This was real. The weight of the mission was starting to sink in. He wasn't some observer anymore. He was a participant. The transport ship shot through the atmosphere, leaving behind the safety of the Xalax facility and entering the vastness of space. Ethan stared out the window, watching the stars blur into streaks of light as they sped toward their destination. The journey to the Vernari Dominion would take hours, but in Ethan's mind, the time felt like it stretched on forever. What would he face when they arrived? How would he infiltrate an enemy world filled with soldiers just as dangerous as the ones he had trained with? The mission felt insurmountable, but Ethan knew there was no turning back now. He had chosen this path, and now it was time to prove that he was more than just a human among aliens. He had to show the Xalax Empire, and himself, that he could survive, adapt, and rise to the challenge. The ship's engine suddenly cut off, jolting him from his thoughts. The calm before the storm. The comm system clicked on, and the voice of the ship's captain echoed through the transport. "We're entering Vernari airspace. Prepare for insertion, everyone. Suit up. This is where it gets real." The door of the transport opened, revealing the harsh landscape of the Vernari Dominion. A world of jagged mountains and barren deserts stretched as far as the eye could see. The planet's surface was rugged, hostile. Ethan could see small, fortified outposts scattered across the land. This wasn't a world of cities or lush greenery. This was a battleground, a place where survival depended on strength, cunning, and ruthlessness. The soldiers around Ethan began to check their weapons and adjust their armor. It was the final moments before they were dropped onto the hostile world below, and the tension in the air was palpable. Ethan did the same, his hand steadying his pulse rifle and his mind focusing on the mission ahead. With a final, lingering look at the transport's open hatch, the soldiers began to jump. One by one, they leaped out into the chaos below, their suits quickly adapting to the harsh conditions of the atmosphere. Ethan followed suit, stepping into the void of space, his stomach flipping with the sensation of falling. As he plummeted toward the planet's surface, the last thought that ran through his mind was simple but profound. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The mission to prove himself. And the war was far from over.